This is Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde.
It's been an eventful week, and Allan, you've had a busy week personally. You've been all over the place, kind of going everywhere. Are we allowed to talk about where you've been, or is it super secret agent stuff?
No, I can talk about some of the things I've been doing this week. We had our Octagon Global meetings in McLean, Virginia, our worldwide headquarters, where we bring in all the people working in all the different offices all over the world, including all the agents. So I'm sitting with Steph Curry's agent and Giannis's agent and Chris Paul's agent, Michael Phelps's agent, Simone Biles' agent, and we're talking Olympics, basketball, baseball, Bobby Witt's agent, Bobby Witt Jr., all the different new developments going on in each sport, revenues, latest trends, best practices, what's coming down the line. Really informative, learned a lot, some very interesting presentations on different things. And it was great. 4 days all together.
And is it like a fun convention? Like, are you Octagon agents a fun group, or is it everybody go back to the room at 8:00 and be up at 6 a.m. the next morning?
Oh no, we were the bar last call was usually around midnight, and the last stragglers would be going to bed around 3 a.m.
Okay, not you among them though.
Oh, I would never.
So Allan, I know you've been following the events of what happened in New York this week, and this has been a real topic of conversation. Bob McKenzie said on the TSN broadcast last night for the Toronto Maple Leafs that it might be something what we saw with Jake Trouba being traded with the threat of being waived. That might be something the NHLPA addresses in the next CBA. But to start this off, let's explain the situation for people, because it is complex and it is not the game of hockey. It's the game of contract law. So let's talk about, and this isn't specific to Jake Trouba. He's not a client of yours, but you've seen this situation play out a few times before. Player has a 15-team no trade list or a 16-team or whatever the number is.
12, 10, 8.
Yeah, it can be any number, right? Yeah. Player, and I'm going to ask you to correct me if and when I get wrong here, because I'm just trying to sum it up, and then I want to get your thoughts. Player cannot be traded because every year that trade list, no matter how many teams are on it, gets submitted to the team. So the team cannot trade that player without their permission to any of the teams on that list. Correct. That doesn't mean, though, that team can't waive the player. That would require what is called a no movement clause. Am I correct on that so far?
Yeah, so you are, and the no movement clause came into fruition in the 2005 CBA. So that's the first time we had a distinction between no movement and no trade. With a no movement clause, you cannot be traded without the player's signed waiver, and you cannot be placed on waivers. Okay,
right.
That's a full protection. Then there are many players that do not have a no movement clause, but they have a full no trade. Okay, can't be traded anywhere, but nothing prevents them from being put on waivers. And then you have limited no trades where the player would submit a list before July 1 every year. And like we said, whether it's 15 teams, 12 teams, 8 teams, that's negotiated as part of the contract. Sometimes it's 15 teams for the first couple of years. It goes down. There's ways to, it's totally wide open.
Right.
Okay. But what has happened in a few occasions, Ryan McDonough is one, Jacob Trouba is another, Barclay Goodrow is another, and there are many other times it's happened where it has not come to public light, where a team comes to a player and says, yes, on your no trade list, you have this club, but we have a deal arranged with this club, and we would like you to waive. And the player says, no, that club is on my no trade list for a reason. I don't want to go there. I'm not going to waive. And then the club responds by saying, okay, we will put you on waivers, and that club is going to take you. So you're going there whether you like it or not. You can either waive and do it quietly, or we can embarrass you by putting you on waivers, and you're going to end up in the same place. Now, to me, it's fair game under the current CBA to put the player on waivers if he doesn't have a no movement clause. But by agreeing from club to club that he's going on waivers and you'll then claim him, and that's our way of getting around the no trade, to me, that is a cap circumvention. That is a violation of the CBA, to me. Now, most people, particularly people on the league side, don't agree with that. Okay? But to me, making that next level of agreeing, hey, he's got a no trade, you're on a limited no trade, you're on the list, we're going to put him on waivers, you claim him, and we've gone around the list. That to me is an extra step that should not be allowed. So how does this get fixed? What would I propose? I would propose that if you have let's say a 15-team no trade, and the team comes to you and says, we want to trade you, to team X, and that team X is on the no trade list. If you go on waivers, no team on your no trade list is eligible to claim you. Okay, so you can still go on waivers. It's not a no move. You're not expanding no moves into other areas. What you're doing is you are guaranteeing the integrity of your no trade list. And that means I can't be traded to that team, and that team cannot claim me on waivers as a way of getting around the no trade. Can still go on waivers, can still be claimed by any other team in the league that is not on the no trade list. That's my fix.
Now, and I think that's, that has obviously come up, and I don't know, I don't know if we could talk to the likelihood that gets into the next CBA, but I believe the NHLPA has probably noted that, and they're probably going to want to talk about it. Allan, let me ask you this. When a client accepts a no trade list, it's usually in lieu of money, right? So if you're in a negotiation, it's you and I'm the general manager and you're the agent. If I say to you, hey, can you take a 5% reduction in yearly salary and I'll give you a 15-team no trade? Is that normally how it goes down? How do these clauses get in? What are they in lieu of?
I think that historically, that's how it started.
Okay.
But nowadays, the elite players in the league are almost automatically going to get full no move clauses for most of the term of the deal.
Okay.
Highly sought after free agents who go to July 1 are going to get full no move clauses when they're sitting with multiple offers. And there was one famous situation that has been discussed publicly a few times, but Patrick Eliash went to the free agent market after he signed with me when he was in New Jersey. And the final offer from New Jersey before July 1 was millions and millions of dollars below his market value.
Okay.
So we were really left with no choice. We go to the market, And we negotiated all day on July 1 and ultimately made a deal with the New York Rangers.
I remember that.
Okay. And we agreed on the term. We agreed on the signing bonus. We agreed on the compensation overall. We agreed on the compensation year to year to year. And as we were doing what I would consider to be housekeeping in finishing off the deal, I said to Glenn Sather, and of course, we want a full no move for the entire contract, which is typical of what any player in Patrick's position with offers from more than 8 teams on July 1 is going to get. And this is going to be the number one deal on July 1. It was ultimately the number one deal by way of total compensation. And Glenn Sather said, no, I don't believe in them. I said, what do you mean you don't believe in them? And he said, I've never given a no move clause in my life. Wayne Gretzky never had a no move clause. And I said, well, Glenn, there's a reason for that. They didn't exist until 2005.
Right.
So there's no surprise here that Wayne Gretzky never had one. He goes, well, I've never given one and I'm not doing it. I don't believe in them. He says, I'll give you a 10-team no trade. And I said, hold on a second here. You expect Patrick to cross the river to go from New Jersey to New York, and you're not giving him a no move clause. And it was vitally important to get one because the Rangers in the recent past had put Wade Redden in the minors, making $6.5 million. And basically he was buried there, right? So the no move clause will protect Patrick and any player in his position from that eventuality. And as the agent, part of your obligation in putting the deal together is doing everything you can to protect the contract.
Right.
And you're thinking to protect it, you're taking into account every single possible worst case scenario. And Glenn said, not doing it. Not doing it. And he believed, because he was the highest bidder and was offering the most money, and he was offering the longest term, that Patrick would agree to it. And when I talked to Patrick about it, he immediately said, I have a bad feeling about that. Call Lou. And we hadn't talked to Lou since the afternoon of the day before, when Lou gave his final offer, which was millions and millions of dollars below market. So I called Lou. It was around 6 p.m. on July 1. And I said, Lou, here's the situation. And I just told him exactly the way it was. I said, we have a deal on term. We have a deal on money. We have a deal on everything. And it's not getting done over a no move clause. And Patrick asked me to call you. And Lou said, Allan, don't do anything. Don't call anybody. You sit tight, and I'm going to call you back in 10 minutes. Huh. And Lou called me back in 10 minutes, and he said, I'm going to match the entire offer with the Rangers. And it was $12 million more than Lou's final offer the day before.
Wow.
And I'm going to give you a full no move clause for the life of the deal.
Wow.
And it got done.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man. So what, can I ask how Sather reacted when you called him and told him, I'm sorry, we're going to the Devils?
That was a fun
back
call.
to the Devils?
That was a fun call.
I bet it was.
Yeah.
How was it before how long was it before you and Glenn talked again?
About 3 months.
About 3 months. Okay. So training camp. Okay. Fair enough. That's awesome. Well, so this is the thing. So Allan, the other side of this, we just went through the contract side, but there is the personal side. And, I in this particular instance, this is a captain. This is a person who went all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals with this team last year. This is a person who pushed his way out of Winnipeg to get there. This is a person who won the Marc Messier Leadership Award. Whatever value you would place on an award, doesn't matter. He still won it. This is somebody who loved New York, loves being there. And last night in his interview with, I believe, ESPN, he said, it's kind of par for the course that you eventually get fired at MSG. He said it's a rite of passage, I believe is what he said. And I want to know what you think about the personal part of this, because you see the players and their families on a personal level. Jake Trouba's wife, the reason that he didn't waive his no trade last summer to go to Detroit was because his wife is still finishing up her medical residency. She's going to become a doctor. What is the fallout on the personal side for these players when something like this happens?
Well, I'm not going to talk specifically about Jacob Trouba. I don't represent him, but you're asking a question that applies to any player who could be in this situation. And many players have been in this situation in the past, and many will be in this situation in the future. And I've been in this situation with many players and experienced the phone call of, hey, Allan, this is a really hard call to make. Geez, I hate making these kind of calls, but we made a move and we traded your player and he's going to X and X team. And would you like to tell him? Do you want me to tell him? Most GMs will call the player directly first. Mm. And then we'll follow up with a call to the agent, but they assume the player is going to get off the phone and the first call he's going to make is to his agent. Mm-hmm. Right? And depending on the player's situation, let's just assume the player loves where he's at, is really happy, didn't see a trade coming, and was totally blindsided by it. It's very difficult. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult. It's really difficult in the off season. It's even more difficult when it happens at the deadline. Many times players know they're going to be dealt. Last year of the deal, they're a highly sought after rental. They're on every trade board. Everyone kind of knows they're going to be dealt. The GM has said, you're likely going to be traded by trade deadline day. It's an asset management deal. We're not going to re-sign you, or we can't make a deal to re-sign you, so we're going to trade you. But these players sometimes get traded for players, and those players never saw it coming.
Right.
So they're pulled off the ice in morning skate. Or they get a call at home and they literally have to pack a bag and be on a flight in the next several hours. And many times kids come home from school and it's kids, daddy's been traded and he's leaving in an hour. And people have said, and I've seen it all, look at how much money these guys make. That's just, you don't want that to happen. Go do something else. Well, you know what? Fuck you. Because this is human. This is families. And just because they happen to be fortunate and to be the best on of the several hundred players in the world and have the skill to play in the NHL shouldn't begrudge anybody what it's like to leave your family at that time in those moments.
Right. And, I want to know, what you think about a team making this public, because it was quite public this summer, this particular situation. Oftentimes these situations sometimes the team wants it to be public in order to put pressure on the player. Sometimes they don't, but it leaks out because they're talking to other teams, and then other teams' front offices might be leaky and that sort of thing. How do you deal with the pressures of something like that being public and playing out as a spectacle rather than just a business move?
I think you always prefer it to remain all of these discussions and situations to remain behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. But, the insiders out there have very strong relationships with the clubs, with general managers, people. Many people inside the club know what's going on. And whether it's a assistant coach or even a trainer or equipment manager, I can, in some instances, figure out when something leaks where it came from.
Wow!
Based on who leaked it, and I can sometimes track down. It's my old prosecutor detective nose can track down the source. Many times I can't. Mm-hmm. But when those situations reach the public realm, it's never a good thing. Right.
It seems like a pretty crazy sort of last few hours in the NHL. So we'll see how it all plays out, Allan. But there's other things to talk about. And we had a full question and answer episode prepared for you, but I think we're going to do partial, and then we could save a lot of the questions for next time, because we haven't done one of these in a long time, and a lot of people had some very interesting questions for you. And I think we got enough to do to finish this episode off and do the entire next episode on it, if you'd like. So do you mind if I throw a few at you?
I think we've seen enough questions to do the rest of the season. But
I know, it's unbelievable. But
go ahead.
I think the first question, and a lot of people had this. This is a DM from somebody, and it does relate to the Trouba situation, and it relates to a few others. Is Are teams' front offices, are they known around the league for characteristics? And what this person wants to remain anonymous, so I'm gonna paraphrase what they're saying. But meaning that, hey, I know if I sign with X team, their front office operates like this. I know that if I sign with other team, Y team, I know their front office operates like this. And as an agent, do you have to warn sometimes players, hey, if you do go there, just be aware this is how these guys operate. These guys are a little bit more respectful. These guys are a little bit more hardcore. Like, how do you, is that a conversation you have with a player?
Absolutely.
More than just the city. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. There are certain general managers and organizations that operate. Everybody's got an obligation to do the best job they can do for their constituency, whether it's the owner, the general manager, the organization as a whole, the player, the agent. We have interests that sometimes don't align. Mm-hmm. Many times, most of the time, we have interests that align. Team wants the player. Player wants to play for the team. Team wants to win. Player wants to win. Team wants the player to play well. The player wants to play well. There is a lot of alignment out there. But when a player is in the position to decide where he wants to be, there are hundreds of different criteria out there. Some very important, some passing consideration, but it's not just one, two, or three things. I mean, there are some players who've said to me things that I've never even thought about as to why they want to play in a particular city. Mm-hmm. And it's opened my eyes to like, hey, let's have a real detailed conversation here. Let's go over all the criteria you're factoring into the decision making and why you've ranked teams in a certain respect in who to call first, who to talk to, where you want to go, where you don't want to go, what teams do you want to put on your no trade list and why. And we talk about all of that. There are some front offices that are known around the league and have reputations with players of being totally mercenary.
Right.
Today, they can be your best friend and operate always on the up and up. And tomorrow, there is no boundaries to the ruthlessness they will have in doing something they want to do. So right. If you're going there to an organization like that, is that a consideration? If it isn't, you're an idiot. Right?
Okay.
You better consider that, right? Because you could be a victim of that ruthlessness. There are other organizations that will bend over backwards to always do the right thing for a player and his family. I've seen players traded for next to nothing who would have significant value on the market because a GM says, look, I'm not going to hold this up. This move is good for the player and his family, and they want it. And it could be a family consideration. It could be a health consideration. And it's just people behind the scenes doing right by other people. And I asked a GM once who did something like that a couple of days later, I was really surprised you did that. It was a really classy, really like it made an impact on me. It made an impact on the player and his family. Like, wow, like that was really nice of you to do that. And he said to me, hey, Allan, it's spreading good karma. You do something like that out there, and hopefully in the future, somebody's going to do something like that for me or for my organization, and what goes around comes around. And great way to look at it. I saw him do that with my own eyes, and I have tremendous respect for that. No one knows, but I know.
Right.
The player knows.
Does word get out about good organizations like that? I don't know if it's good, player friendly. I don't know how we want to quantify that, but does it make a difference when it comes to winning?
It does.
And attracting good players. It
does. I've had players say to me, here's the deal, Allan. The only thing I want is to win. Mm-hmm. Okay? Forget about the money. I've made my money. I'm not going to play for free, but I'm not going to the team that's going to pay me the most money. We're going to sit here. We are going to go through depth charts. We're going to go through, what role I would be expected to play. And we're going to consider more than anything else the likelihood of this team winning if I go there. And I've had other players say to me, I want you to understand this, Allan, because it's very important. The only thing I care about is how much money I'm going to make. And I'll go and I'll go anywhere. All right? So it's your job in this situation, Allan, to maximize my compensation. Period.
Okay.
I need to know what and sometimes that depends on where the player is in his career arc, right? Maybe he hasn't had that big contract yet, and this is his one opportunity to set him and his family up financially for the future and and money is the number one criteria. And maybe he's already won once or a couple of times. And hey, it's nice to win, but I've won. Mm-hmm. So I don't need to chase it.
Right.
Right. I want to win wherever I go, but I have other things here, family considerations, kids, wife, whole host of different things. Medical. I know some players who have a off-ice physio, and they want to be geographically located close to that guy for treatment on a regular basis. I mean, and it's like, wow, I wasn't thinking about that, but now I get it. I understand it. And that becomes a concern or a criteria. There's things that, over the years that is brought to my attention that I honestly never considered until it was brought up to me.
So I'm looking through the next question here. This one comes from Blue Sky, and I think you're going to find this pretty interesting because I certainly did, and I'm curious to get your response on this one. If a player is, let's say, playing in the Four Nations Cup, Allan, or playing in the Olympics, does that play into their ability to negotiate for more money in the summer? Hey, this player is part of an elite group. They played for their country. Does that affect what your salary is going to be, do you think?
Well, I think it's a feather in your cap to be considered amongst the best of the best to represent your country. Mm-hmm. And between Sweden, Finland, Canada, US, we have some very elite players in the NHL. And to be named to Canada, to be named to Team USA, or to any of the other two teams is certainly puts you in an elite category. And I think it does impact how people perceive you in the marketplace going forward. So I would say it definitely has some positive impact in how you're perceived.
Guy Incognito on Blue Sky asks, do retired or ex-NHL era guys get to go to NHL games for free? I know in baseball, players who played a certain amount of their career games in the MLB get to go for free, and I was curious if NHL players get that perk as well.
So most NHL players who are retired, based on where they're living, become members of the local alumni association. Mm-hmm. And there is usually a retired player in that city running the Alumni Association, and they do charity games, appearances. They have get-togethers. They have an alumni night where they bring everybody in. Most buildings have an alumni room.
Right.
Yep. And Bell Center has one. I used to, earlier in my career, used to be a thrill walking by the alumni room before the game, peek in, and you would see Jean Beliveau and Yvan Cournoyer and Henri Richard, Yvan Lambert, and whoever was in town passing through would be there. And the Alumni Association would arrange tickets for free and passes into the alumni room for those players.
That's cool. That's cool. I don't know if you can answer this one directly, but Matt Park on Blue Sky said, it's not something that you could, he acknowledges this. He's like, I'm not sure if you can answer this directly, but who is the hardest negotiator executive that Allan has faced in a contract negotiation or whatever else, but also the one he's most comfortable going with for a beer with afterwards? So someone who's you guys go head to head, but you can also put it aside and have a beer.
There isn't a GM in the NHL that I can't go have a beer with.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
Except for one, and I don't need to say who. So there's 31 out of 32 GMs, and I can go have a beer with any of them. I like like and many people know, this is my 30th year in the business.
Yeah.
I've negotiated 1.7 billion of NHL contract value. A lot of the GMs today are people that I grew up with in the business. I knew them when they were interns in hockey operations, and
or
now
the OHL,
and now they're running teams.
Yeah.
And we've traveled throughout Europe together. We've emptied mini bars in hotel rooms together. And you have that bond of mutual respect. And even having said all that, some of the people in the group that I've just mentioned are extremely hard, forceful negotiators. Doug Armstrong is a very good negotiator, but he's also a very strong negotiator. At the same time, I have a great amount of respect for him and friendship with him away from when we're negotiating contracts.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're negotiating contracts, he can be a real prick, as he himself acknowledges. And if he heard me say that, I'm sure he would chuckle. He's a great guy, but he drives a hard bargain, and there's nothing wrong with that. If that's, there's nothing wrong with that. But there's several other GMs who are very similar in that regard. There are others that are much more congenial, and some GMs you'll get to the deal quicker than others. Mm-hmm. It's their style. Others are very cautious and move very slow. Many people wonder why, if a negotiation starts in July, how could it possibly still be going on in September?
Steve likes to say, "What do you guys do all day?"
Right. And that's there's if you think that, there's a lack of understanding of the dynamics and the arc of a negotiation. Negotiations are all about leverage. Who has the leverage? And then it's about pressure points. And you know what I've always said about deadlines.
They clear the mind.
When there's a pressure point, what are pressure points? July 1 is a pressure point. The first day of training camp is a pressure point. The first day of the regular season is a pressure point. December 1 for Group 2 restricted free agents are pressure points. Trade deadline is a pressure point where deals are going to get done. There has to be resolution or it goes to the next level. How many deals get done on restricted free agents, Group 2s, the day or two before the start of camp or one day into the start of training camp? And how many actually extend beyond puck drop on the regular season? These are pressure points that bring deals to resolution. And you can talk on a deal with a GM every day for 2 months. Nobody's really moving because everybody's waiting for the first pressure point for there to be movement. And then it's a matter of evaluating, is there more movement to be had at the next pressure point? Or are we at a point now where both sides are within a zone of you're within the zone of being able to close the deal?
Right. Okay. I like that. It's a good question. Great question, actually. Great answer, Allan. Manev just wanted to say, one of the more underrated parts of the professional sports agency business of player management recruitment. No agents can give away their cards, understandably, but what does that look like in the world of hockey? So Allan, if you meet somebody for the first time, or you go and you scout a player and you become their advisor before they reach the age of eligibility in the NHL, how do you approach, keep in contact with, hey, we should talk some more? How does that normally go?
So I've always believed that the one thing players want more than anything else is to know that their agent cares about them. And there are some very big agencies out there that run what I call puppy mills. And they have huge client lists. And if you actually spend time talking to players, they're like, hey, I talk to my agent once a year. I haven't seen my agent in a year. Kind of shocking.
Shocking, yes.
Shocking. And to me, I don't need to run a volume business. I don't think in those terms. What I think of is, do I want to work with this player? Is there a compelling reason to work with this player? And if I do, I am going to give my heart, my soul, everything I have to the situation, to the relationship. And that's the way that I look at every situation. I'm not going to get too much into the weeds, because then I think you're
trade secrets.
Well, you're giving up a little bit of your magic tricks and how the tricks really occur. Mm-hmm. And you can call them magic tricks or trade secrets. But to me, the overriding thing, anybody who is an aspiring agent, you have to think in those terms. There is nothing out there I won't do to help my player, to give him the resources to succeed.
That's pretty clear. So, Allan, we'll leave it there because there are a lot of questions to get to, and if I feel like if I ask another one, we're gonna go down a rabbit hole and keep going. And I know that you got to be at a game tonight. Do you not?
Yes, we're recording on Saturday, and Marc-Andre Fleury is going to be in the net in a few hours against the LA Kings. Perhaps his last appearance ever in Los Angeles. So I'm looking forward to being at the game down at Crypto.com Arena.
And another client of yours joined his team recently, David Juracek. So we just want to say David Juracek, friend of the show, who made time for us before he was even drafted. So wanted to send him our best as well. Yes,
and you and I and a couple of other people spent his draft night with his dad in a basement bar in Montreal, and a good time was had by all.
It was awesome. The barrier between English and Czech was there, but we managed to make it work, and we had a great time doing it. So, Allan, I hope you have a great time tonight. Please give Marc-Andre Fleury our very, very best. I know everybody that listens to the show, I don't think there's an NHL fan that doesn't love him. So I hope you have a great time down there.
Thanks. I just want to point something out here before we sign off. This was on my dad's desk at his office when I was a little boy. Mm-hmm. It always used to be sitting there, and I always used to look at it when I would go with my dad to his office, sometimes on Saturdays. He used to work on Saturdays. And my dad passed away in 2010. It's on my desk now. And whenever I am sitting at my desk doing anything, I usually put my hand over it, just have my hand sitting over it.
That's do you do that during the show most of the time?
Sometimes.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I know that you and your dad were close. There's been a few podcasts, if you go back into the archives, where Allan's talked about his dad. But I think at some point I'd like to go back to that, and I'd like to talk about influences, because a lot of the questions we have, and maybe we can talk a little bit more on the next episode, lot of the questions we have about influences and pathways and how you got here, everybody always wants to know how you got here, and you have told that story. But I think the audience should know a little bit more about your relationship with your father, because from what I know and from what you've told me outside of this, it's pretty special.
He was my mentor, my best friend, my mother and my father, and the greatest person I've ever known.
This has been Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde. Follow Allan Walsh on Twitter @WalshA. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts by searching Agent Provocateur and hitting the subscribe button. YouTube.com/SDPN.